You're listening to Thunderquack Podcast Network.
Hi, I'm Bill Sienkiewicz, and you're listening to the Epic Marvel Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Epic Marvel Podcast. This is New Mutants Episode 2A, The Demon Bear Saga, covering a period of the New Mutants in 1984. I'm your host, Curtis Findlay.
And I'm your co-host, Frank Martini.
And today, Frank, which issues are we going to be talking about?
So we will be covering New Mutants 13 to 21.
Yeah, just kind of a short episode. We're going to cut it at halfway through this book, which is the New Mutants Epic Collection, Volume 2, called The Demon Bear Saga. And it's been quite a while since we actually recorded the New Mutants, the first episode, and I had to kind of go back and give myself a little refresher on a couple of the points. It's been a long time.
Yeah, I sort of did the same because there was a lot happening on the first volume. So because it's the second volume, but the status quo has changed quite a bit compared to what we saw in the original graphic novel that introduced the team. So the roster has changed since then. Karma has left the team, and Amara has joined the team. Illyana Rasputin, Magik, has joined the team as well. Also, the environment of the book has changed because when the book was launched, the X-Men were out of the picture because they were out of space. They were prisoners of the Brood, so that took place during the very famous Brood saga in the X-Men. So that means that the New Mutants were the new team, but also the only mutants were the main mutant teams. And now the X-Men are back, and the setup is different. So the Xavier School environment is different. So it's a switch compared to what we saw in the first volume.
I was actually quite surprised, like you mentioned, the roster changes. And so the roster changes quite a bit, adding two characters, removing one, and we're going to add a third one by the end of this volume as well. And I was actually very surprised that Claremont really puts a lot of the focus on Illyana and Amara. Like, at the risk of forgetting about other characters, like, I think Sunspot especially gets the short end of the stick through this volume, or at least the first half of this volume, as he doesn't take center stage ever, and Cannonball's a close second.
Yeah. He whines a lot.
He sure does. But at the same time, he has some great character moments that show that he's going to be breaking out of that soon, hopefully soon. He's growing as a character, and Claremont, I think, has a nice trajectory. Pun intended for Cannonball trajectory. I tried my hardest to get an interview with Bill Sienkiewicz to talk about this, but he was too busy, unable to get together. So I'm hoping I'll be able to do that in the future. But we have no comments from him and only a couple from Claremont, so from a previous interview that I did. So we have a little bit short on interview clips, but that's okay. We still have some great content to talk about. But before we get into that, why don't we talk about some listener comments? Because I asked all of you listeners out there on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter to let me know what you thought about this book. And not just about the Demon Bear Saga, but about the stories that come before and the stories that come after in this kind of era in general. We got a lot of good comments. On Facebook, the first one I want to highlight is Nick. Nick says, this was one of the first epics I got after you, meaning me, after I replied to a conversation that he was having with Explain the X-Men podcast. And so it was this or Executioner's Song. He couldn't remember which volume. Either way, it's the first that he read. And then he goes on to say that that was the first epic collection that he got, and he's now, 90 plus epics later. Well into the collecting mentality, and he calls me an enabler. So that's funny. Thanks, Nick. He says that regardless, I picked it up to read the source material for the New Mutants movie, and he says, gotta say they nailed it. And I don't know that I agree with that statement. We're not going to talk about the movie a lot in this. I want to keep it primarily comic focused, but I do want to say that I wasn't that big of a fan of the movie really at all. How about you, Frank?
I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen it? Okay.
No. I skipped it. The last few mutants related movies were not that inspiring for me, so
Yeah.
I haven't seen them.
Well, I thought that one was going to be a nice, refreshing change. I like the trailers and such, but I didn't think it delivered. There are some aspects that I'll point out in the movie versus the comics throughout our conversation here today. But yeah, especially since you haven't seen it, we will not talk about the movie very much at all. Okay, Patrick says this is where the New Mutants turn from the baby X-Men and into its own thing. And there's one thing that makes this change, the arrival of Bill Sienkiewicz as artist. He had started to experiment more and more as his Moon Knight run went on, but when he came into this book, no one was going to call him a Neil Adams clone. He brought a style that was unlike anyone else out there in mainstream comics. Would Demon Bear be considered the classic it is if it were drawn by Bob McLeod or John Buscema? I don't think so. The image of that impossibly sized bear with its crazy jagged edges make that bear nightmare-like and make the threat of it so much bigger than its earlier glimpses we saw of it. So great.
Yeah, it's sure that the impact of the work of Bill Sienkiewicz is obvious, and I don't think that the rendition of the nightmarish aspect would have worked maybe with a different artist, but it wouldn't have been that great. And I'll save it for later when we mention that, but there is more than just Bill Sienkiewicz's work. I think the coloring also is extraordinary in those issues.
Yeah. There are definitely parts to pick out when we get to those stories. I think that, if you had a more traditional comic artist, he mentions John Buscema or John Romita or somebody like that, who would render the bear more realistically. I think the fact that Bill gets so abstract with his style that makes it like, what are we looking at? Is this reality? That kind of stuff. It works perfectly to also convey that more horror aspect of the title.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, another comment here. Ryan says, I remember liking the Buscema issues more than Demon Bear proper, which I feel is contrary to the general opinion. In fact, I stopped reading a few issues into the Sienkiewicz run. I think I need to go back and finish this reading so I can listen to the podcast spoiler-free.
Yes, Ryan, you should.
I think you should too, absolutely. Give it another try. There are definitely reasons why I think people kind of stop at the beginning, and it's partly to do with the art, but there are other elements as well, and we'll get into that when we hit the first issue of Demon Bear. Okay, James says, I remember hating Sienkiewicz's art when I was reading these as a kid and almost gave up on New Mutants because I found it so hard to read. I appreciate his style now, but first impressions die hard.
Okay, I definitely can relate on this comment because I read that in French when I was maybe 12 or 13, and it was impossible for me to read it and to understand what was happening. So I can definitely relate. I really disliked the art in the first place, and it took me years to really warm up and to understand what was happening there. So yeah, I can understand, but I have forgotten this aspect, and now I fully love the art on the book.
Yeah, I think this is a good comment. Reading it as a kid, I can totally understand this as well, because first of all, you're not as mature of a reader just in general. Bill Sienkiewicz does a lot of stuff, not just with the designs of the characters, but in his panel layouts, the way he composes his panels that are tricky, and I think it does take a little bit more of a seasoned reader to understand how the flow works. It comes naturally for someone who's been reading reading comics for a long time. But yeah, as a kid, I can understand that, and then couple that with just the abstract nature of the way it looks, especially coming off of the previous issues, which were Sal Buscema. Wow, what a 180-degree difference that is.
And also maybe because it was the kiddie X-Men book or the baby X-Men book, some people were thinking that it was a book also targeted to younger readers.
Yeah, very true, very true.
So that must have been quite a jarring experience.
No kidding. Okay, so another Patrick says, incredible art throughout and Claremont's character work at its best. I would agree with that. He does some really, really good character arcs in this book here. It's interesting to me that a title centered around a younger cast, The New Mutants, seemed more mature in its themes, art style, and generally darker tone. There, you were just saying that, Frank. At risk of being overshadowed by Demon Bear and Legion, the Buscema issues that open the collection are great. Magik as the unsettling outsider was interesting, especially playing off of Rain's innocence, and Sim was wondrously terrifying here. Also, special mention to the Hellions, who make great frenemies to the New Mutants. I like that term. That's great. He goes on to say, for all the good, some choices are odd. I'm perplexed at the choice to turn Karma into an obese villain. That'll happen. We'll talk about that in the next volume.
Yeah.
And the somewhat problematic changing of Tom and Sharon's race for reasons I don't think are ever explained. Yeah, I'll definitely want to mention that toward the end of this episode. And I think one Scott Summers would agree when I say Magneto has no place with Lee Forrester. We'll comment on that in the next episode as well.
Well, that can be discussed because it was a story that grew in Uncanny X-Men, and it was the time when Magneto was evolving into a more likable character. So, well, anyway.
Okay, so he says, in terms of the book's physical quality, my only complaint is that the lettering is printed blurry in issues 13 and 14 of my copy. So, Patrick, this is for you. I'd have to say that you have a defective copy because my issue is printed just fine. I have no issues with blurry printing at all. I don't know if this affects more than one volume, or it also could be this book has been reprinted, so I don't know if you have a second printing. I have a first printing, and it is just fine. I haven't seen what the second printing looks like.
No problem on my side because I have a digital edition.
There you go. Okay, on Twitter, we have one comment from X-Men Consumer Reviews. It's called, this Twitter account is called. It says, if you read any New Mutants, read this. Sienkiewicz's art is experimental in the best way, and Claremont is in his prime. Very, very true. Thanks for your comment there. And then one more comment from Elvis Estrada 1. He says, definitely not my favorite. I love Claremont, and I love this era of Marvel, but I found the characters to be whiny and weak to the point where it was difficult to read because they were unlikable and unrelatable. Yeah, that's true. There is a lot of whining in this, and I think that Claremont definitely tries to push that to the extreme to show, that these are young kids still, even though, especially Sam is supposed to be like 18 or something, right? But he's the whiniest of the bunch, it seems. But he does want to try and convey their inexperience and their youth, and I think maybe he overcompensates for that in the whiny department.
Yeah, I think that, of course, there are whiny characters, but most of the time the mutants are sort of like that too, because
That's true.
They are minorities, so they suffer a lot from that. But also they are teenagers, and I think that the book reflects very well the mood changes that teenagers can have. Having two at home, they definitely can relate on that. Yeah, the mood swings they can have. I think it's very well characterized by Claremont there.
Yeah. And, that lends itself to great character changes as they grow. And I think part of the issue also is that we're reading these in a big collection of like 500 pages, right? All together. And so Claremont, when he was originally writing these, he's thinking, okay, so somebody might just stumble upon this at their local 7-Eleven and pick it up. So I need to convey the attitudes of each one of these 7 characters in every single issue. So while it's tolerable in one issue, it maybe isn't as tolerable when you're reading, 15 to 20 issues in a row.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay, Elvis continues and says, Danny Moonstar and Magik are awesome characters, so I had high hopes for the New Mutants in general, but I tapped out after the first volume. So I don't think he even got to read this volume here, which I think is a change because there's a shift in tone and everything that, Elvis, if you're listening to this, I think you should reconsider and give this one a shot.
Yeah, for sure.
I myself was saying, as I was reading these, by the time we got to the end of the Buscema issues, as I was feeling like these kind of spinning wheels, we need a change, and then you get to the next issue, then all of a sudden, boom, things are totally different, and it's great. So, yeah. Well, thank you, everybody, for adding your comments here. If we get any more through the week, we'll address them in next week's episode. But I think, Frank, it's time for us to move on.
Yeah, okay. We start with the New Mutants issue 13 called School Days. Of course, Claremont writing, Sal Buscema art, and Tom Mandrake as a finisher, so which means that he's doing a lot more than inking and probably following loose layouts by Sal Buscema.
So I think that's an important distinction to make, and this follows on kind of how Bob McLeod was also finishing Sal Buscema's pencils after he stopped doing the pencils himself. And we talked about that a lot in the first episode, where we were talking about how Sal Buscema doesn't even look like Sal Buscema because Bob McLeod put so much of his own style into it that it still looked like Bob McLeod. These issues don't look like Sal Buscema. Some of the poses do, but
yeah, exactly. You get some of the classic visual elements that Sal Buscema can bring on a book.
Yeah.
But the faces especially, they don't look Sal Buscema at all.
Yeah, it almost looks like Tom Mandrake is trying his best to even imitate Bob McLeod's style. Some of the faces, especially Cannonball with the big ears and such, look very, very reminiscent of Bob McLeod's work. And yeah, Sal Buscema is really here just to lay out the story because he's a good storyteller. He can do it quick, and then Tom Mandrake's taking the bulk of the detail.
So the story of this issue is that it's the arrival of Amara at Xavier School. So she's joining the school, and Professor X chooses to understand how her power works, considering that she has very limited control of her powers. Like she did in the issue before, or one or two issues before, because of her lack of control, she causes almost a disaster at school. And throughout this issue, Professor Xavier is dealing with that and trying to establish a connection and give Amara some confidence. So that's really the main topic: power management, and also how inadequate she may feel in this modern world, because she comes from ancient Roma, a city that was still living as the ancient Rome. So she has to really connect with the modern world as well and deal with her new powers. Also, there are a couple of subplots that are taking place in this issue. First, we are dealing with Kitty Pryde being a sort of non-member of the team, but being part of the book. And she's working with a teammate of her called Doug Ramsey that we will see more and more appearing in the forthcoming issues. And also the relationship between Kitty and the New Mutants, which is established right from the cover, that there is a disconnection between the two of them, although they have the same age. But Kitty is an X-Men, and she tries to see them as the X-babies. So there is this also relationship that we will see further on in the upcoming issues that are developed for the first time here.
It's interesting the way that Kitty is treated in this book here, and I think because I just recently reread the first volume of the Generation X Epic Collection, and Jubilee is on that brand new team of young mutants, and the attitude there is she's treated so differently by the writers. Instead of staying on the X-Men like Kitty does and just kind of making her appearances, Jubilee actually fully joins the team and does have a kind of I know better than you attitude, but is fully invested in the team, where I think Kitty seems to hold it a little bit at arm's reach. Like she cares for the kids and cares for the team, but is still quite guarded in terms of her place with the X-Men.
I think that what is interesting, one of the things I really enjoyed in this issue is as I said previously, it's the beginning of the relationship between Professor X and Amara, because there's a lot of insecurity, and it shows all through the issues. We get also a nice scene with Rain, when she's dancing. So there are a lot of things really related to acceptance of who we are, what those people can be as mutants, and so on. That's one of the fragility that I see in this issue, and I really enjoyed it.
It's very great to see. This is a common theme that's going to take place throughout kind of this entire book as they struggle with figuring out who they are as people and as teammates and as mutants. Very true. I like to see that Xavier is actually teaching in this issue here. Like he does a lot of showing the students how to be better people and how to use their powers and such. Usually that's, we got a lot of that in the early days of the X-Men, back in the 60s, but once all the X-Men became adults, he never did any teaching again, or I mean, not in the same way as he does in this. So it's nice to see him taking up that role again.
Yeah, and the old X-Men, because I read those books not so long ago, it's basically how he's yelling at them because they don't use their powers the right way. Right. So that's really what it is. Here it's really about not only powers, but accompanying those person into a growing process. I think I've always had mixed feelings about Charles Xavier and about being a sort of shady character sometimes. But here I see him as really a nice person trying to help those kids as best as he can.
On page 11 of this collection here, we get a good moment with, or Chris Claremont uses the narration to kind of explain the relationship between Rain and Danny, because Danny can commune with animals and then Rain turns into an animal. So they share a very special bond. And that comes into play quite a bit throughout this, especially the first half of this book in the Demon Bear Saga. But one of the aspects, while I didn't like the New Mutants movie, one of the aspects I did like was the representation of this bond between them. And they were so close, and they turned it into kind of a romantic relationship, which I thought would have been a natural progression had they, been able to do that back in the 80s with no pushback. I mean, there still would be pushback even if they did it today, probably, but not in the same way.
Yeah, I think this connection is something that it pays off in the first in the Demon Bear Saga, but it's actually interesting and also very convenient in terms of storytelling to say that at some point those characters can connect, and it would be reused in a very interesting way, for sure.
So there's not a lot of stuff, I think, in this book that places it in a specific era of time, except for like the Michael Jackson references we'll see later on. But check out the computer lab on page 20 here that they're all working at with their huge, they look like Commodore 64 computers. And none of them know how to really use computers, which it boggles my mind to think that, today my 6-year-old knows her way around an iPad better than adults do, that kind of thing.
It's true. And there's no mouse.
Right, yeah, you're right.
They're just typing lines of codes probably, but no mouse. And it looks like a very strange experience.
Yeah, it's very funny. But I mean, that was how it was back in the mid 80s. Very cool. Okay, let's go on to issue number 14. This one's called Do You Believe in Magik? Referencing that popular song from way back when. I don't even remember who did that song. So in this issue, Sim attacks the mansion in order to try and destroy Illyana, but the team manages to drive him back, which is cool to see them come together, especially for Illyana, whom I don't know if they really trust her at this point. One thing that I would love to do that we should have done, because when we recorded the first episode, I put us on a 2-hour time limit. And so we really, really rushed through that mini-series. And I think I would have liked to spend a little bit more time on that, talking about that and unpacking it, because a lot of really important stuff happened there that I think we kind of glossed over. But that happened, if you're reading these collections in order, it's basically 2 issues ago. And so we're revisiting all of that stuff, opening up those old wounds quite quickly after that mini-series here. But we find out a lot of Illyana's secrets, or the team finds out some of her secrets at least. And what's the other plot line here? Oh, it's Stevie finds out, actually. She gets really involved and is there for some pivotal moments where she finds out about Illyana's sort of demonic side.
I think it's really a recap and the sequel for Magik, the miniseries here. And I think that Claremont does a very good job in putting that back into the story, but not just be a recap and having a key fight with Sim, and also the way Danny's power can work on Sim, when she's trying to see his worst fear,
right?
And how and the chaos that follows that, and also I think it's a very goofy story in a way that the whole thing takes place at the center of the living room of the mansion. So the final page is especially crazy. But yeah, that's also the fun part of the book.
I think it's probably important to have this issue here for the sake of the regular readers. Miniseries, especially in the early '80s or mid '80s, where we are right here, are still a fairly new concept for Marvel. And so, if you have a subscription to this, you're not going to necessarily find the Magik miniseries, and comic shops weren't as abundant as they are now, and so. There's a good chance you didn't actually know at all what was really going on. You only got it from the context of, like, if you're reading the regular issues, Illyana's young in one issue and then she's old in the next. And how did that happen? What happened there? So to have an issue like this, I think, is good to bring everybody up to speed. It's kind of nice that this volume also starts out that way because, like in our case, it's been a long time since we read volume 1, so it's nice to have that refresher.
I read Magik again not so long ago because I wrote an article about it, and I had the chance to get some insights from Chris Claremont about it. So yeah, it was really fresh when I read the book, and that's why I was saying that it's really a sequel, because the setup that we get at the end of the miniseries completely here, and it starts right straight away from what you could have read if you read the miniseries and jump on the book.
Right. I love the moment on page 38 where Magik teleports the car and the team to Limbo. Because when she teleports, she can't just teleport from place to place. They have to travel through Limbo. So they have to make an appearance in Limbo first before they move on to somewhere else. And that moment, like, that was one of the moments in the miniseries where it's like all of a sudden the car pops out of nowhere and you see the kids and then they disappear. Like, what the heck? And then it pays off right here in this issue. So that's a fun moment. I like that. It kind of would be neat if that actually didn't happen until like issue 35. And it's like, oh yeah, that.
Playing the long ball.
Yeah, right. That would have been great. But no, it's pretty much the next issue. Yeah.
Actually, I saw something like that reading recently a Hulk epic with what was done in Future Imperfect, the miniseries with Peter David and George Perez. And in the regular book, there was a 1 year difference between the two books. And there was one scene which is repeated exactly the same way between the books. A bit like this. So, nice. And the payoff was longer than in this case.
That's very cool. I like that. I think that's great. At the end of this issue, Xavier, we find out that Xavier can walk with no real explanation or anything. And I'm like, what? What's going on here? I went back to some issues of X-Men to try and figure it out. But do you know why he's walking? I wasn't sure.
Yeah, he's walking because his body was taken over by the Brood Queen during the Brood Saga, and then he was cloned. Oh, it's comic book.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's right.
And he was cloned, but initially he had a sort of mental block, so he was fully healed, but he couldn't walk initially with his new body. And after a while, he recovered and started walking again. So that's the big surprise that we see here. And I remember this issue of the Uncanny X-Men around 180 something, where he's playing basketball.
Right.
And that was quite surprising for me to see Charles Xavier standing up.
But I went back to that issue, and I guess I just skimmed through it. I didn't see any explanation in there either. Usually we get a little footnote or something, but no such luck.
So, no such.
From here, it says we should go see 180, because at the very, very end of this issue, we find out that Doug Ramsey's been accepted into the Massachusetts Academy, which is the home of the Hellfire Club's Hellions. And Kitty's like, uh-oh, he's going to get in big trouble, and I can't tell him that I'm a mutant or that they're big trouble. So it says go to X-Men number 180 to see what happens there. And so that issue is not included in the Epic collection. They give us a little text recap instead, which I kind of think it would have been nice to have the full issue. But then I went back and read it, and actually nothing of real consequence happens except they just, they're sitting on a train and they see Emma.
And by the way, that's the issue where Xavier is playing basketball.
Right. Yeah.
I forgot that. Yeah.
Actually, I guess the thing that it does happen in that issue is that we find out that Doug Ramsey is, in fact, a mutant.
Yeah, that's the moment when we find out. Absolutely.
So it is kind of odd that they don't even include like some excerpt pages. That would have been okay. Because the issue actually isn't 100% about that story. It's only maybe like 5 or 6 pages that it takes up. They could have stuck it in here, I think.
In the story, there's a very nice couple of pages, especially when between Kitty and Storm, when they discuss Storm's physical change and
Right.
how Kitty is reacting to that. And it's a beautiful moment, beautiful pages, super well written by Claremont. So that makes a very good read. But yeah, they could have used just a few pages. Also, it's important to note that 180 is also the moment when the X-Men leave for the Secret Wars.
Secret Wars, yeah. Actually, that would be good to include here too, because it has direct ramifications to some of the decisions that the New Mutants make throughout these issues. So, yeah, they should have put. Actually, now that I think about it, the whole issue would have been great to see in this collection.
Yeah, because sometimes later they will take some decisions on their own, and even when Charles Xavier comes back, they keep on taking some decisions on their own. Also because they've been used to it.
So if you go and read the X-Men, I think is 181, the next issue, they return right away.
Yeah.
But the next 3 issues of New Mutants all have to do with the Hellfire Club story, or the Hellions story, or the next 2 issues, I guess. Is it just 2 issues? No, it is 3 issues.
It's 3.
So that all takes place in between X-Men 180 and 181 because the X-Men are still gone. They even say, like, I don't know, a period of time passes while they're at the Massachusetts Academy, like a week or something, right? I guess maybe they just aren't aware that X-Men have returned.
No, it's never really clear. I don't think it is very clear the amount of time that the heroes and villains stayed on Battle World.
Okay.
So we don't know. We know they've been missing for a few days, maybe longer, but it's never really clear how long they've gone missing.
Right.
So it makes sense that this story, which takes place in a few days, which can be seen as a few days, happens when the X-Men are missing.
Yeah, so the timeline's a little odd, but and this is a period where Claremont really was quite heavily tying these 2 titles together. So you do have to kind of figure out, the placement of all of these in terms of what the X-Men are going through, because they take off a little while later again. They just keep on going into space.
Yeah, they do that a lot. So issue 15 called Scaredy Cat. So as I said, in my notes, I wrote that we find out in X-Men that Doug is a mutant, and he and Kitty have been taken hostages or prisoners in the Massachusetts Academy by Emma Frost. So the X-Men are missing, and the idea here is that the focus is more on what's happening in the Massachusetts Academy, and Emma Frost is trying her best to integrate Kitty or indoctrinate Kitty into the Hellions, and Iliana's Astra self tries to find out what is happening there. So she gets rejected, but she sort of identifies where she needs to go to try and help Kitty. So the teams goes there, and consequences of the fact that Charles Xavier is not there, they need to take a bus to go and save Kitty, which is a bit silly when you think of it.
That's my favorite scene right there. I love that because it's like the X-Men would just hop in their Blackbird and Avengers would hop in their Quinjet, and it's like, but what are these kids gonna do that don't even have driver's license and there are no adults around? I guess the only option is to take the bus.
Yeah, but they get very creative about it, and
they spend a whole page of them, throwing out ideas and problem solving, and it feels like a natural conversation. I applaud Claremont for taking a kind of a silly premise but delivering it well.
Yeah, and they try to contact the FF, and they try to contact the Avengers, but obviously everybody's gone. So they're stuck in a situation, in an impossible situation. So they are quite resourceful, I'd say, about it. And when they arrive there, they are surprised to see a gigantic version of Emma Frost and Kitty wearing an Hellion costume. So meaning that there's a big fight coming.
Yeah, there's a little bit of
I agree
fallout.
with
Yeah, go ahead.
no, I was about to say that I completely agree with your comments about characterization because maybe 7 or 8 pages of the issue are just about how they are going to commute from one place to another.
Yeah.
So, but in the meantime, there's a lot of chatting between them, and once again, we get some nice scenes between Sam and Danny, which are the co-leaders, but Sam is the leader de facto because he's the oldest, but he's not very confident.
Yeah.
So those insecurity issues, they are discussing that, and also nice scenes between Sam and Rain. So it's really character building, but so it's not an action-packed issue, even though we have a few demons that Iliana unleashes by mistake. But it's not an action-packed issue. It's more of a character-building issues, and I really like those.
Yeah, in fact, I'd venture to say that all three of these Hellion issues are more focused on characterization than they are action. We do get some battles and such later on, but a lot of it is for the purpose of character building, which is good. I mean, that should usually be the focus of the action, is to further along some character development anyway. We do get a little bit of fallout from the Marvel Team Up Annual number 6, the team up with Spider-Man and Cloak and Dagger. Because Rain and Bobby they find them in a trance because of the whatever was in their bodies during the Marvel Team Up story.
Yeah, the drug.
The
drug. Yeah.
And so that's gonna pay off several issues down the road. So we're setting up some stuff here.
Whenever we're talking about Cloak and Dagger, drugs are always involved.
Yes, it is true. It's their thing.
I read the 3 collections that were released not so long ago, and it's all about that most of the time.
Yeah.
Really.
Okay, well, moving on to New Mutants number 16. This one's called Away Game. In this issue, the New Mutants, they have broken into the mansion, and they have to figure out a way to find, or to the Massachusetts Academy, and they have to find a way to save Kitty. And so a lot of this issue is sneaking around and coming up with plans, and they kind of they partner up, and so we get some good character development from different people who don't normally talk to each other. So this is a common way to have some character development, is split up your team so they're all they all have different missions, but then pair them up with characters they don't normally pair with, so that you get some good conversations. So we get a direct Cannonball and Magma conversation, and we get Danny and Iliana talking together, and they're going to have a great moment later on because they are the two that kind of have to rescue the team in the next issue. And then Sunspot and Rain get paired up together, which you don't get to see them kind of hang out very much. But it all comes to a head at the end when the actual Hellions show up, and they have like a little... They have not really a little. They have a big fight.
There's a lot of action in this issue.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, and a lot of it though is, again, it's to demonstrate their powers, demonstrate how they use their powers, and demonstrate how they work together or don't work together as a team. Because these are all still novices, and then they're paired up against another team of novices, the Hellions, who are just learning themselves. And I can't remember, have we saw the Hellions, or is this the first time we meet the Hellions, like in comics in general, or have they been in X-Men before?
Yeah, they may have been in X-Men before, but I don't think they've been in the previous collection. So I would say it's their first time there.
Yeah, it's the first time they're meeting the New Mutants for sure. I think this issue was kind of just a stepping stone between this one and the next one. There's not a whole lot of progression except for the fact that they just get in the mansion, but they kind of get blocked.
I think that back in the days when you look at the characterization of Emma Frost, I mean, she's always been a strange character and a strange person in general, but here she's really a manipulative and totally evil person.
Right.
And once again, I read those issues as a kid when I was a teenager when I read that, and I really had I really hated her, and I definitely remember that she was representing something very evil for me back then. And really, she appears like a very manipulative person. You know, what she does to Cannonball and to Magma in those 2 pages. You know, it's very mean. And the rest of that we will see later on. That it doesn't stop there. Completely unrelated, the art of the issue. We have a couple of inkers there.
Yeah.
So we have Tom Mandrake and Kim de Mulder, and the look and feel of the book changes dramatically page after page. So I don't know how the inking was done and how the page were given. So whenever we have a couple of inkers, it means tight deadlines in general. But the look and feel of depending on who's inking, changes a lot.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, it looks like Kim did the last half of the book.
Yeah.
Because that definitely is a different style, especially the last few pages. Quite go in quite a different direction, and you can actually see a lot more Sal Buscema coming out in those last few, because Kim doesn't follow as closely, or he follows more closely to Buscema's style than Mandrake does.
Yeah, but maybe page 5. Is it 5? The one of the pages with the discussion between Kitty and Emma.
Yeah, well,
Don't know. Maybe.
It's
the page layout, and the doesn't look very Sal Buscema to me. Especially the first and the final panel of the page with the very close focus on Emma Frost. Doesn't look very Sal Buscema to me. But, well, who knows?
Right. Yeah, it's true. There is one moment on page 79 of this collection when the 2 guards are captured, and Danny gets them to talk by showing them their worst fear, like projecting that in front of them. And their worst fear is the White Queen, just a kind of a demonic form of the White Queen.
Yeah.
But they make the comment, they say, "You kids may call yourselves heroes, but you're as cruel as the Queen herself." And I think that is this is a turning point for Danny, who realizes kind of the responsibility of using her powers and not using it to torture or torment, which is what she did just in that moment there. So the way she approaches things from now on is different, and that's going to play out especially later on as she becomes a way different character and gets tied to the Valkyries and such.
Yes. Issue 17 called Getaway, the New Mutants versus the Hellions. So it's clearly the continuation of the very action-packed previous issue. So most of the team has been captured, save for Iliana and Danny, which have escaped in limbo. So we find something new about Iliana's powers is that she's traveling through space, going through limbo each time, but also through time. So when they teleport back in time, 1 year has passed, and when they arrive, they see that the Hellions and the New Mutants have become very good friends, and that the 2 teams have merged somehow. So they have to travel back through limbo and in time also to go back and try to liberate the New Mutants. So they get there, and in fact, the issue concludes with a challenge or a fight between Jetstream and Cannonball for the freedom or not of the New Mutants. And towards the end, when the Hellions are defeated, and Sebastian Shaw and Emma Frost come back to a sort of chaotic ending from which the New Mutants manage to escape. There's a lot of stuff happening in this issue.
There is. I don't know. I don't think that I was really a fan of these 3 issues in general. I didn't find them to be totally captivating or anything. And I made this comment earlier when we were talking about the listener comments. I felt like they were kind of just spinning wheels. A lot of these characters are having the same conversations over and over again, and I thought that things need to be refreshed a little. I do appreciate the forward momentum with characters like Iliana, who were discovering a new aspect of her power and such. I find, though, throughout this book that, or at least the issues that we're reading here, it's like whenever they're in a tight jam and they just need something to happen for the sake of the plot, they're like, oh, let's just give Iliana new power. You know, all of a sudden she can create force fields around the hospital or whatever. And
Yeah.
this is another one of those things,
So,
like the time traveling aspect.
Yeah, plot device, because 2 issues before, they went through limbo. So they went back in time in limbo, but not in the real time.
Oh, that's right. I guess she did it unintentionally. Yeah.
So there is no, her powers didn't work like that before. So yeah, she's a very convenient plot device.
No, I mean, when she teleported the car and the students,
Hmm?
she teleported
Yeah,
them and they saw the young Ilyana. So they went back in time for a brief second.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I
But
didn't,
not when they came back.
but not when they came
They
back.
just used it for a geographical move, and it
Right.
was not a move in time.
Yeah.
I think that what is interesting for me in this issue is the relationship between the Hellions, because it's not a very healthy relationship, because there are some very bad characters there, especially Empath, which is quite a jerk. And also, we don't, I like the word frenemies that was used by in one of the comments, because we don't really know if those guys are going to be opponents or if they could turn into friends or maybe members of the New Mutants, like the character Cat's Eye. We see at the end that she could almost be a sort of other kind of Rain character. So I really like the characterization of the Hellions there.
Yeah, they're definitely used as counterpoints to all of these characters. And with Cat's Eye in particular, we can see basically she's kind of a more confident Rain. If Rain had more of her own confidence and control over her abilities or whatever, then she could potentially be Cat's Eye. But yeah, I mean, all of these characters are also under the influence of the White Queen and under her teaching. So yeah, they're all going to come off more snobby and more evil. And where is Douglas through all of this? They save the team. Kitty's with them in the end. They go back to the mansion. But what happens to Douglas? Where's he?
That's a very good question, because I don't think we see him at
We
all.
don't, and we don't see him again until issue 21. So, and they just wake him. And in that issue, they just wake him up at home, and he was in bed. It's like,
Yeah.
where is he?
Oh yeah, that's funny. I didn't. Yeah.
And I don't know. Maybe because he's so tight to Kitty, maybe it's something that happens in the pages of Uncanny X-Men.
Oh, I can't remember.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and read those issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice moments also between the couple of pages between the New Mutants and Kitty, going towards more of a more acceptance between them and a better relationship than before.
Yeah, and this is where she kind of steps back out of the pages of New Mutants and goes back to X-Men. So we're not going to see her for a while now.
Yeah. And obviously, as they come back, just to make the connection between the upcoming issue, we see the ghost or the figure of the demon bear appearing in the last page, and the look and feel of that creature is going to change dramatically.
Yeah.
Next
So
issue.
this is a perfect example of, this is how Sal Buscema and I think this page is inked by Tom Mandrake, how they portray the bear. It's not nearly as menacing as, you flip one page in this collection and you have a stunning cover with Danny with these massive teeth over her head, and then the splash page at the beginning of this issue with the bear on the bedspread. It's just unreal. It looks so good. So this is issue number 18. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention about 17 is the corner box on the cover, because through all these issues we've had the corner box, which is just the heads of all of the characters, which is typical of Marvel of this time. But in the corner box on issue 17, they're all ducking out of the way of Cannonball, who's flying through the cover. I thought that was kind of fun. I like it when they play with the corner boxes like that.
Yeah. Nice stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so the coming of Bill Sienkiewicz to this title is a big deal because they pump it up at the end of the last issue. In the next issue blurb, they say Bill Sienkiewicz's first issue. So they don't often, announce a new artist coming on or make a big deal about it. But here it is. We have a new creative art team, that is, with Bill Sienkiewicz doing the inks as well. So he's fully doing all of the visual art, and then with colors by Glynis Wein. And you mentioned the colorist specifically before, and this colorist is the same person who has colored these previous issues, but attacks it in such a different way because the artwork is so different. and it's quite brilliant, I think.
Oh yeah, I think we see it even more in issue 19, I think, and 20. But yeah, the colors are completely different, and when you look, you compare one page to another. I mean, you flip 3 pages, and suddenly the book doesn't look the same anymore.
Yeah.
And sometimes you feel like the colorist can be different, but that's really not the case. Those guy really and girls, those people really bring something different on the table because of the way they color the book.
Yeah.
I remember that on Iron Man in the 80s, the colorist was always the same person. When the book was shiny and all positive, when Bob Layton and David Michelinie were writing the book, all the colors were sparkling and bright. And when Dennis O'Neil came on board, the colorist was the same, but the color were more dirty, blurred, and it's the same person doing the two different jobs. And here it's exactly the same. And I think we don't see that. We don't recognize enough the work that is done by colorists.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so there's a lot happening in this issue. The main bulk of the story is Dani facing her fears and taking on this bear all by herself and not doing too well at that. She gets critically injured by the end of this issue. But then there are also a few subplots that start off here. There's we get the first glimpse of a new alien creature who is seems to be under attack by his father, and so flees. And flees whatever planet he's on, and who knows where he's going to go. I can probably guess. And then we have another story which actually opens this issue with a woman who, or first of all, we see the Xavier's mansion explode, and then we find out kind of it's a flashback or something. Xavier dies. And then this woman comes to the mansion to try and look for Xavier, but then he's not there, so she leaves. And that's all we kind of get. And so the comments from a couple of different people that we had today were, I started this, a few pages in, I couldn't figure it out, so I quit. And I think that starting this issue off with this weird, glimpse of the future, I actually did have to read this a couple of times to figure out what was going on. To figure out like the dialogue, you only really figure out that it is the future when the woman at the door, I guess a little bit later on in this issue, looks at Ilyana as a teenager and says, but this character is way older than when Xavier died in my time, or something like that in the future. And so you figure out that this is someone from a different reality. Now, they never say her name, and because she has short red hair, I thought she was Rain Sinclair.
Rain, yeah, for sure, yeah, completely. Yeah, it took me a while as well to say, okay, who's that? Okay, and because I read the first few pages again, I found out and I understood what was happening, because that's I remember very well that it's the time when Rachel arrived also on X-Men.
Right.
But yeah, it's very confusing.
Yeah, it's not clear. And so I can understand completely. And then, and to top it all off, we have some unconventional layouts as well. So, we have, if you look at the very the second and third page where the mansion's exploding, there's some boxes, like the explosion, the mansion explosion it's in a panel, but then it's like behind another panel.
Yeah.
But then the panel, like they're overlapping panels. And then you go on to the next page, and there's tilted panels that are different colors, and how do you read all of this? And it's very, very experimental, and such a contrast from the last issue that what's going on? Not too sure, and I can be confused, and especially as a child, being like, I have no idea, I can't read this. But you get past that, and you get to the training sequence with the kids, and then I think that's a lot more straightforward. We get a good chance for us to see how Bill Sienkiewicz is rendering all of these characters that we already know. So we get to see their certain power sets, and he uses a lot of the same visual language, like the black spots around Sunspot, and Magma's look as she turns into her molten state and such. So all of them have very iconic hairstyles as well, so that we can, it's obvious who these characters are, even through Bill Sienkiewicz's, abstract art. But what I love about this is the last sequence as Dani takes on the bear herself. And you go to page 136 in this collection when she trundles outside, and she yells to the bear, and you see the bear manifest in the sky and is roaring, and then you have the eyes in these two
in the
eyes in the
snow.
snow below. It's like, why is he depicting it like this? What do the eyes mean? Or those are Danny's eyes, and is this supposed to be we're like seeing through her eyes, or like that's a or it's like a second panel where it should be in its own panel, and it's like her eyes are widening because she's surprised at what she sees, because we turn the page and then there's this massive bear right there in front of her. But it's just it's an interesting way to convey that, and I love that splash page with the bear. And in fact, Bill's rendering of this bear throughout this entire thing is this basically a massive blob of black, of negative space, kind of representing the the looming shadow that's been over her life this entire time, that's hanging over her. I think it's a great drawing, and he's very consistent in the way that he draws. And this bear gets more and more abstract as we get through these 3 issues. And then the next few pages, the dialogue becomes more and more sparse. So you turn the page, and we have the first attack where the bear slashes at Danny. There's a little bit of dialogue, a little bit of narration, I mean. Then the next page, there's only one panel that has narration in it, and then the next page has nothing until the battle's over. And this is Claremont, who loves to put in narration everywhere, but he's letting the art speak for itself, which is something that Claremont usually doesn't do. So that, I think, speaks very, very highly to what he thought of Bill Sienkiewicz's art.
Yeah, and we would have, thought balloons, in a classic Claremont storytelling.
Oh, totally.
And we get something completely different there.
Yeah.
Thought balloons were used before. When Danny is in the danger room and so on, or when Rachel appears, we have thought balloons. So it's definitely a choice to get rid of that, so that like when you are in the fight, you completely black out and you're so focused that you don't think really, and you're purely on instinct. And I think it ties with that here, and those are amazing pages. I think one of the things that I really enjoy throughout this issue is the visual expressions, the faces of the characters. Because, of course, we have the panel layouts and we have the crazy stuff and the more mature storytelling. But I think that the faces of the characters are super expressive, extremely beautiful also, with some ties of art of John Bolton that we could have seen in the classic X-Men backup. So something very different from even from what we saw in Bill Sienkiewicz's previous work. I think it's an evolution compared to what he did in Moon Knight or in FF.
I think so, yeah.
I don't know how much time there is between the end of Moon Knight and the beginning of New Mutants, because I haven't been able to find the dates, but there's a clear evolution in his work, in my opinion.
Well, for sure. I think everything that he was doing in Moon Knight was building to this point. And he was for sure, I don't believe there's much time at all in between those 2 issues. I think he kind of just jumped from one project to the next. But no, sorry, that's not true. He ended his time on Moon Knight, and then he just did like covers and stuff for a little while. And then, because at the back of this book, there's a little note from Bill. Bill says, I had been away from regular comics too long. I had done a few fill-ins here and there, but I was aching to get back to a regular book. My name had been out of mainstream comics for too long, and I didn't want to be forgotten. Chris Claremont first approached me to do 2 issues of the New Mutants, and soon after that, he asked me if I'd like to do the book on a regular basis. I thought about it for about 30 seconds and said yes. I thought it would be interesting and fun.
Yeah, interesting and fun is
yeah.
It's a nice way to present it.
But then the next thing that happened with the team, the fundamental breakout moment, was Bill Sienkiewicz and I sat down to do the 3-part Demon Bear Saga, and had so much fun that he decided to stick around for a year. And that was where the book just, the same sense that everyone talks about how good as the X-Men was, it was my synergy with John Byrne and Terry Austin, and later Paul Smith, that broke it out of the mainstream. Bill did the same thing with New Mutants. Nothing like that had ever been seen before. Nothing like it has been seen since, really.
Yeah, it is just
and
incredible.
We had more fun than is probably legal.
Can you tell me a little bit more about joining with Bill on this story?
Well, we were just bullshitting one afternoon, and I pitched an idea, and he liked it, the Demon Bear, and so we did it. And I think what Ann and I were thinking of was we do this story and at the same time look for a more contemporary, kid-friendly penciler. The challenge with Sal's work was that it looked like everything else, and I didn't want that. I wanted this to be very much a kid-centric book. That there needed to be a totally different visual sense to the characters and to the moment.
Well, you certainly went in the opposite direction then.
That was the key with Bill. He totally understood and embraced the idea that they were kids.
But it is interesting that he... one of the reasons that I think that he left Moon Knight was just because his art was becoming so different. It was taking a long time to do, and he just couldn't keep up with his deadlines. But then he wants to jump back into doing a monthly book. Like it's a big commitment, and he seems to do it well.
Especially if he's inking his work.
Yeah, I mean it definitely takes a lot of work, a lot of time. I love this final splash page in this issue where it's the kids, they find Danny in the snow, and there's this huge black tree above, and there's a lot of white negative space below. It's just a well-balanced page with the black on the top and the white on the bottom. And it reminds me of, there's one Moon Knight page that he did with the death of a character, very similar to this, in the snow, and it's the final splash page, and he sets it up in a very similar way.
And once again, the way the colors are played, the white used as a negative space will appear again. So that's a very nice way to use it. And I really think that the way the red is leading the storytelling of the page.
Yeah.
Because you would be tempted to focus on the tree, which is at the top, and then suddenly the red of Sam's shirt, Rain's hair leads to Danny. It's a very straightforward thing.
But there's also other visual cues to that as well. It's like the snow, the snow that's flying through the air is pointing us there. All of the footprints in the snow lead us right to exactly what we need to focus on.
Yeah, so it's really a great page.
Okay, well, let's keep on going over to number 19.
Yeah, so issue 19 called Siege. So Danny is rushed to the ER room where the medics are going to try to fix her injuries after the battle with the Demon Bear, including what appears to be a broken back. So the team is gathered in the waiting room and meets with a couple of people. So Sharon, a nurse, and Tom Corsi, a police officer. And as they are all gathered here, the bear attacks the hospital and eventually abducts the new mutants, the nurse and the officer, into his realm, whatever. It's a very quick-paced way to explain this story, but there's a lot going on there because there are quite a lot of fights between the mutants, the new mutants, and the bear. There are a lot of pages of that. There is some nice characterization here also. Meanwhile, Claremont also continues his subplot with Warlock, including the Starjammers, which are really cool. So it's a nice couple of pages. And what I think was my main interest in this issue are the first few pages, because we were talking about the colors, and the red is central in these pages. And whenever we get into the surgery room, we get into this red coloring. Whenever we are in the waiting room, we have this orange coloring appearing, and a lot of white used as negative space. So that gives an astonishing visual, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's used very specifically too, because red puts you in an alarmed state. So your tensions are higher and such, and so when we're in the operating room, and that's the fact that it's all red gives us a different feel, and orange is a more neutral color. And so in the waiting room, we're a little bit more at ease because the tensions aren't as high as the operating room. So that's kind of I like that. That's a nice visual cue.
Yeah, I like the way the white of the nurse suit is used. Sometimes her figure is just laid out and not fully inked, it looks,
Yeah.
especially on page 4 of the issue when she arrives. So there's quite a lot of visual nice things there.
And then when the bear comes and you get that one shot in the hallway where you just see the claws and it's all black and the little muzzle at the top there. It's like, wow, it's just suggestions. And that's a lot of Bill's work is he suggests what things are, where the buildings are or what the layout is through his artwork. And it's just, it's very, very effective.
One of the things we have in this issue, and you mentioned that earlier, is that we have Illyana starts displaying new powers. So whenever she's injured, a sort of armor starts to appear. So it's something new, which will come to play further and further. And even if we jump to Inferno, we remember the look and feel of Illyana with her full armor.
Yeah.
Then, so it's the beginning of what we will see then. Also, I really enjoyed once again the faces of the characters and the fact that we have Alfred Hitchcock popping up.
Right.
And I think it's the guy next to Alfred Hitchcock looks a lot like that TV shows from the 60s called Ben Casey.
Oh, okay.
That was drawn in the comics by Neil Adams.
Right.
So I wouldn't be surprised to see a sort of connection between that.
That's so funny. Yeah, could be.
So lots of great visual expressions. 2 pages after the Hitchcock appearance, we see Illyana and Roberto together, and the way that in the last panel, Illyana's face is distorted and biting her bottom lip because she's worried about what is happening. That's very expressive. And well, there's not so much happening in actually when you think of it in this issue, but the way it's rendered is smashing.
Well, I mean, there's still, there's a lot of waiting because they're waiting for the operation to finish all the surgery and stuff. But like they do a really good job of keeping the tension. The tension is high throughout this entire issue. While not only are they trying to operate, but then Rain's making contact with Danny, and that's not healthy for Danny with what she's going through right now. And so there's just, I don't know, I think that the pacing is really, really well done here. And we get to these final couple of pages where the bear makes his full appearance again, and it's just this huge black blob. The eyes are like crazy spirals and just kind of wild. And they're teleported to somewhere in the daylight. It looks like a desert. And then we have the contrast again between the massive black shape of the bear with the white that's used as kind of a void. It's the desert, and so it's like there's nothing around them. They can now have this uninterrupted battle. And that leads us into the next issue here, number 20, called Badlands, and the opening double page spread. And I think I mentioned earlier that bear becomes more and more abstract as we go along. Yeah. So now we have this bear, and it's even like he's angular in the way he bends now, or the way it bends now. But great. I mean, look at this background here. The clouds and the mountains and the trees are just squiggles, and he puts just enough lines to indicate that they're like in a tall grass field, even though most of it is just a solid block of yellow. It's just all of this great hinting at what it's supposed to be, suggestions of the landscape, but you can tell entirely what it is.
On this page, I wonder if everything which is written, because we'll get into the aspect of the plots, but the way the title is written and the way that the map is presented and the explanation of what the map stands for and the way Stanley is written, I wonder if it's Tom Orzechowski's work or if it's Bill Sienkiewicz. I really wonder, because it could be Sienkiewicz, part of his work included in the page.
I kind of think it is, because I think he's, I mean, I guess I don't know. I'd have to go read some of his own original work, just where he does everything, to see what his own lettering looks like. But I would think so. I mean, he is also doing the map in the top corner, and it seems like he has a pretty good idea of how he wants everything laid out here. Did you notice that this map has, on the outside, it has the alphabet to indicate the different squares, the different regions on the map, and it goes up to X, and then Y and Z is included at the bottom of the the credits box. I don't know why he decided to put him down there,
Oh yeah, right.
but he did. Yeah, this is
Oh,
a
that's
great page.
funny. This is good.
Yeah.
This is really good. Question about the location. I was wondering if it's a different dimension or a different time. Because when you read the top box that says the bear owns domain, a Virgin America untouched by the white invaders from across the sea, a pure unspoiled land with rich with power, it's implied that it's a different reality, but it could be the past.
It could,
and it could tie with the fact that there is a Native American connection there.
Well, I think that's definitely intentional. They since we're dealing with an Aboriginal story, that they're taking us to the historical ancestral land. I think that's very intentional. Whether it's a manifestation of that or traveling back in time, it's unknown, but it's also kind of irrelevant to the story. But I think it's probably back in time, at least enough that all of these spirits or whatever that are attacking them are they're dressed in the traditional garb and stuff.
Yeah, because there's a bit of contradiction here, because that this Virgin America thing, and then Iliana says that my sorcerer's powers are limited back home, but this seems to be mostly magical realm.
Okay.
So you could imagine that it's the past, or maybe that the past was more of a magical place than the present can be. You don't really know, but it's nice to have this unknown situation there. I liked it.
Yeah, totally. We have a lot of red in this issue again. In fact, the bear is colored kind of a red brown now to heighten that aspect of it as well. And there's one page on page 172. The bear swipes at the orb that Iliana is protecting. And so the operating room is still red, but then once the claw tears away some of it, we can see the color on the other side. So that's kind of fun. But yeah, this one is just one big long attempt to try and stop the bear from damaging the hospital. Like, that's really all it is, and it's exciting. And throughout all of this, like, we're seeing every one of these characters die one by one, but it's not I don't know if this is supposed to be all in their minds or what. They're not actually being hurt. And I guess there's a healing property wherever they are as well. As long as they're in the light, they seem to heal.
And you have this double splash page with the clouds and the glimpses of light.
Yes. Yeah, it looks really
sun
good.
Appearing, which is incredible. Once again.
Yeah.
And having a digital edition for that is really good, because you can really much more enjoy the double splash pages.
You don't have the gutter loss.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and if you can imagine, like, doing this kind of a page today, trying to get across just a shining beam of light. It's easy to put on a computer effect to give it a glow and whatever, but Bill uses, like, I think he's probably using white to convey a lot of the, like, he's painting white stripes on black in order to show the shimmering of the light against the dark clouds. Very effective. It looks great.
Yeah, I was wondering if there was an inker involved, but he's still doing the full work there.
Yep, he's doing everything.
So just those two pages must have, all those pages with all the lines he adds. I think that maybe he must have had some time to work before the beginning of the book, because doing that on a monthly basis is an impossible task.
Yeah. Well, and who knows? He might have had help as well that he hired, and they're just not credited, because that's, a lot of pencilers or a lot of inkers would have, a studio or a team they work with. So if I ever get to talk with him about this, I can ask him that and see. But I also love the one splash page where the bear is finally defeated. The sword cuts it in half, and it just kind of shatters. And it splits down the middle. And the bear is no longer red or brown. It turns blue. It turns a passive color. And it looks really, really great. And we see a couple of figures appear, and it turns out Danny's parents were being held captive by this spirit bear.
This is the moment when the story becomes a bit hard to understand, because it's really unclear why those two were trapped into the bear's body, or how they were into the bear's body. or how they were the bear. Then we have the fact that the police officer and the nurse come back as Native Americans.
Yeah.
So that's a bit confusing. And I think that the comeback of the X-Men and the healer thing is a bit too convenient compared to how mature the rest of the story was. I think that this moment there is very comic booky,
Yeah.
compared to what we saw before.
Yeah, I would have loved to see, since they made such a big deal about how injured she was, it would have been great to have her on the road to recovery for a while instead of like magically fixed. I mean, we get one issue. In the next issue, she's definitely, in a wheelchair and still recovering and such, but they quickly forget about that after that.
Yeah, there's a thing. There's a thing still in the annual where she's in a recovery session with TV, but here it's very quickly dismissed.
Yeah. And yeah, the whole couple of characters, the doctor and the nurse, seems pretty problematic, especially today. I don't know why, especially because there's no explanation given. Like it's hard to understand why that decision was made.
Yeah, because somehow they connected with the location and because they were turned into demons, so when they were like, I don't know, transformed or something. But I don't think there's a big payoff there.
Yeah, unless it comes along down the road where we haven't read it. But
Yeah.
as far as this issue is concerned, it's just way out of left field. Seems very awkward and a little insensitive, in fact.
Fun fact, it took years to see this issue published in France.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Because we had a lot of censorship in France back then. Born Again, Daredevil, Born Again was never finished in the magazine that was reprinting Daredevil at the time, and the New Mutants suffered the same problem because it was visually too violent.
Right.
So the French editor didn't know what to do with the book, really, because there were when there were a few violent panels, sometimes they would cut a bit of the page or change the drawing of the page. So that was what we had in the 60s, the 70s, and even the 80s. But when it came to those issues, they didn't know what to do. So they stopped publishing them.
Were they publishing these stories at the same time, like maybe like the month later after they appeared in America?
No, they were printing them like it really depended. But best case was a year after, maybe a year and a half. So they could have seen it coming.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, why even start the story if you're gonna come across that problem? They should have been. Obviously, they weren't paying attention.
Yeah, because they were, focusing on the previous, monthlies. So maybe they didn't have the time to see that. And also, we had back then. I mean, it sounds like we were living in USSR then, but we had a censorship committee in France.
Oh yeah.
This committee was giving advice and saying, okay, this is too violent. Before the book was printed. So that may have been one of those cases. And once again, Moon Knight was not really that much published in France. So I guess that the more visual issues towards the end of Sienkiewicz and Doug Munch runs were not printed in French. I'm not sure, but I'm almost sure of that. It was unprecedented to see art like this in a comic book at the time. So the reaction must have been very strong. So it took years to see it printed again. So it has a very big status here because of that.
Wow.
For all guys like me.
And going back to the comment about if someone else had drawn these issues, would it be nearly as menacing? It's like if Sal Buscema had gone through these, would France have still censored it? Probably not.
No, but the story would have been different because I don't think that the writer plays with the same strengths.
For sure.
Depending on who's writing.
Yeah.
Especially if they're working Marvel style. It wouldn't have been the same stuff.
Yeah.
Once again, if it's Marvel style and that Claremont is giving a plot and then the artist does whatever he wants and then the dialogue comes in, then for sure Sal Buscema would never have done that. But the story would have been different.
Yeah. Wow. That would have been something to see.
Yeah.
Okay, last issue. Let's talk about the last issue here.
Yeah, last issue 21, called Slumber Party. It's one of those issues that takes place after a big event has taken place. So we get into a more quiet setup with more of a characterization issue. And here the story goes that the girls throw a party with with some girls from the area that we had seen in previous issues when they went to the mall, for instance, and stuff like that. Meanwhile, the boys are having a very quiet moment, and they have a bonding moment, which is very nice. And Warlock literally crashes and arrives in the mansion, and we get all this moment when Warlock is discovering the location, and when the new mutants are connecting with him and discovering that he's a sort of mutant too, and they finally integrate him in the team with the support of Doug Ramsey, who discovers that, well, they are mutants too, and these are the powers they have. So it's not a quiet issue because the Warlock aspect is very visual, and but it's a very different setup than what we had before. I'm kind of feeling that I'm not sure we needed a double-sized issue for that. And maybe I would have preferred to have a regular 20 pages issue that would have gone a bit faster than this one. But it's, once again, nice looking issue with some great visual expressions and some fun parts as well, which is a different vibe being played by Sienkiewicz and Claremont there.
Okay, so I'm going to disagree with you there. I think that this actually really...
I knew it.
I really think this benefited from having extra pages. I thought that the being able to take the time with Warlock exploring the world, because, you know, they're playing up the whole fish out of water angle here, for us to figure out this character... because we're basically meeting this character for the first time. And we have lots of different concepts that we are being introduced to. In fact, not just the look and this character discovering a new planet, but the whole techno-organic virus. Everything he touches turns into a machine. Like, that is being portrayed here. And it's all being portrayed without the influence of the New Mutants. If they had cut this issue in half and had to squeeze this whole thing in here,
yes.
then they would have had to explain this. Like, it would have been just like in battle, somebody would have been touched and like, my arm's turning into a machine or something like that, right? And so I think I appreciated having it flow a little bit better. What I also liked about this issue was just the fact that during the slumber party, they're trying to figure out how to be superheroes and have a battle and conceal their powers while all of these normal people from town are still around. And again, to try and shove that concept along with the introduction of Warlock into the same issue in half the number of pages, I think would have been a little bit rushed. They would have had to choose kind of one or the other.
Yeah, it's a strange thing to have a double-sized. It's just that it really comes out of nowhere. Because it's not an anniversary issue, no. It's not issue 24, it's not...
It wasn't the climax of the Demon Bear Saga story either.
Yeah, so it's really strange, and maybe it could have been split into two issues as well. It could have worked.
Yeah, it could have.
Well, maybe the decision was taken because the flow of the issue was working better like that.
That could be. I mean, that's something that Bill did on Moon Knight as well. It's like... Because I remember one story, he was talking about the issue called Hit It of Moon Knight, and that was supposed to be just a short backup story that was like 6 or 8 pages or something. And then Bill turned it into a full-length story just when he was drawing it. He's like, here we go. So that could be the case here as well. It's like he was getting into it, and then it just turned into a double-size issue. It wasn't supposed to be, but that's how it ended up. I don't know. That could be. But it is amazing to me that Bill did the whole Demon Bear Saga story by himself. He does a double-size issue by himself, and then he does more issues by himself. He doesn't skip a beat. There's no fill-in issues because he's run out of time or has to take a break or whatever. That's a lot of work for one person.
Yeah. So maybe he had extra time to get ready before jumping on the book.
Yeah, that could be. He had some lead-in time. Okay, so did you see who in this opening splash page, the slumber party, everyone's doing pillow fight and everything like that? Do you see who is welcoming us to the party? It says, "Hi guys, I'm Wheezy. Welcome to the party."
Oh, it's Louise Simonson?
Yep, Louise Simonson. Her nickname is Wheezy, and she was the editor of this book up until just a couple of issues ago. And Ann Nocenti is taken over as editor now. But yeah, Louise Simonson that's her there, and she's mentioned a couple times throughout this book, so that's kind of fun.
Oh yeah, nice. It looks like a lot of those faces look like real people that Sienkiewicz has integrated in the book.
Yeah, I wouldn't be
So
surprised.
this is something that happened previously. When you had writers and artists being in the background or integrated in the book, but it definitely looks like that.
Well, and who are the caricatures that are on page 197, the musicians and such? Because obviously there's Michael Jackson
Yeah,
and Sting, yeah, and
yeah,
or Tom Selleck,
yeah,
but I don't know who the
and
guy.
John Travolta.
Oh, John Travolta,
Yeah, it's
of
John
course.
Travolta.
Yeah. It totally is.
And we had this very strange splash page by Sal Buscema in issue 14 or something, with this Burt Reynolds poster in Iliana's room.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
So yeah, it's the 80s for sure.
Yeah, lots of cultural references, and some people hate it when they do that, but I think it's great. I love seeing cultural references in comics because it's a sign of the times.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it when in the old issue of Strange Tales, when Johnny and Ben put on Beatles wigs and try to get into a Beatles concert.
Yeah, that's completely the time. I remember that around 1990 something, early 90s, there were quite a lot of references to Twin Peaks, the TV show.
Right, yeah.
In Spider-Man, I remember that David Michelinie was making references. Peter David in Hulk was making references to that. So yeah, it's a sign of the time for sure. But
Totally, and same with those computers that we saw in the computer lab.
Yeah,
it all works together.
Exactly.
And some people hate it. I mean, sometimes I'll see comments like, they just talk about Twitter and Lady Gaga all the time. It's like, why do they have to date the comics so much? I'm like, nah, this has always been the way that these Marvel comics have worked, and I appreciate it because I love the snapshot of the day that it's created in.
Yeah, and can you imagine that you're throwing a party like that with just a tape recorder to play the music?
Yeah.
That's on the opening splash page.
Totally, I love it.
Yeah.
I like how this issue ends. I love that Rain makes sort of first contact in a sense, takes the step and the leap of faith to show that they are friends. I like the progression that they slowly find out who this creature is and why this creature is doing what they're doing. They bring in Doug. This is, like I said, we haven't seen Doug since he disappeared in the Massachusetts Academy. He comes back here to help communicate with Warlock. And then in the end, the students, kind of like how they did with Amara at the beginning, they brought Warlock to Xavier and said, hey, this guy's a good candidate for our school. Can we keep him? And Xavier initially is a little angry, but in the end says, yeah, this is probably a good idea.
Yeah, and it's about trust.
Yep.
And once again, it's the students taking decisions, because Doug didn't know that there were mutants, so they go to him because they know he's good with languages and that's his mutant power, and it could be helpful in this situation. And the same thing with when they decide to take Warlock in the team.
Yeah, it's really great.
They're making decisions and then they're all growing.
And what do you think of this last scene where, because Ilyana disappears through a portal halfway through the battle with Warlock, and she just pops up at the end here, and she's got like a spacesuit on with a helmet and some sort of weapon and stuff. Like, what has she been up to this whole time?
Yeah,
that I love it. I hope that I don't know if we get that story at some point, but I hope we do.
I forgot. I can't remember really.
Yeah, it's great. But I think this is a good place to stop because the whole last page, the last splash page, the ending, it doesn't say the end; it says a beginning. So we're seeing that this is a turning point for the team. We've come through a very hard story with the Demon Bear Saga, which really amped up the stakes and played with the emotions and the psychological torment of the characters. And now we're going to move forward and see how these characters have changed because of it. And I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's definitely a good stopping point.
Yeah. This double-size issue also includes a couple of splash pages, some bonus pinups. one of Cannonball, one of Magik, and one of Sunspot. And I love the Cannonball picture because it is not your typical layout, placing Cannonball in the bottom corner of the thing. Is it's not as dramatic of a splash page in the sense of the way you normally would think of a superhero pinup, but the fact that he's like crashing through a helicopter, very cool.
Yeah, but in a more traditional splash page, you would see him going through from
the bottom, probably
from the bottom left to the top right.
Totally.
So it's completely different, and it's even more surprising.
It's very surprising, but that's Bill for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, this has been a great episode. Very cool story. I'm glad we were able to tackle Demon Bear Saga. We had actually been talking about doing this episode for a while. I wanted to come out with the movie, but the movie kept getting delayed, and then when it eventually did come out, I wasn't ready to do that. But now we're here, and next week we'll be back to talk about New Mutants Annual number 1 and also the remaining issues of this epic collection leading up to issue number 31. A lot of cool stuff in here. We're going to see Cloak and Dagger. We're going to see Leela Cheney. We're going to see Legion. And so there's going to be plenty to talk about. So I'm looking forward to that, Frank.
Yeah, me too.
So for all of you listeners out there, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram if you look up Epic Marvel Podcast. You can also search for Epic Collections on Facebook and find our Epic Collection group, which Frank and I are both admins there, and we just talk about Epic Collections all day, every day, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So that's all for us for today. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we will see you next time.
Bye, everyone. Take care.